car! Wu Hao sat by the window, a silk blanket draped across his knees, watching snow fall like soft ash over the city he once ruled. The skyline, his skyline, glittered in quiet arrogance, unaware that its emperor was fading. The empire had his name etched into every steel beam, every contract, every whispered boardroom deal. Wu Hao Group. For 35 years, it had been his dominion. But now, the machine groaned under the weight of a son not born of his blood. He coughed, a deep, rattling sound that clawed up his chest like a final warning. "Mr. Wu Hao, should I bring your medicine?" his assistant asked from the doorway. He didn't answer. His mind was already wandering. Back to the past, back to a girl who smelled like jasmine and rain. Her name had been Milan. Shu Lian had deceived him, something he wouldn't discover until years later. The child she carried had never been his. But he'd already bowed to the lie. He had been a coward. His father had said, "You will marry Shu Lian. She's carrying your heir." He hadn't known the truth then, only that the weight of his family's expectations was louder than his own heart. And Maylin? Maylin was poor, fierce, brilliant, and she loved him not because of his last name, but in spite of it. But the world had already decided who was worthy of his hand. And so, he gave up love for legacy. He married Shu Lian, and Maylin disappeared without a word. Yu Tao stood in the penthouse office like a storm in a designer suit. The glass walls cast reflections of his empire, a cold, ruthless version of what Wu Hao once built. "I told you to cut the pensions," Yu Tao snapped at his CFO. "I don't care if they've been with us for 20 years. Dead weight is dead weight." Wu Hao had once ruled with loyalty as his sword. Yu Tao ruled with numbers and fire. He had fired nearly 40% of the original workforce. Departments that once buzzed with innovation now sat hollow. What mattered was profit, speed, and control. Behind him, the painting of Wu Hao looked down in silence. And Wu Hao felt that old, familiar ache, like a blade tucked just behind his ribs. He had always known in the way the boy looked through him, not at him, in the way loyalty had to be bought, in the way legacy meant nothing to him, only leverage. That boy isn't mine, not in blood, not in spirit, and he never was. But he said nothing. He never had, until that evening. The nurse barely looked up when the man entered, old, frail, wrapped in scarves. But his eyes, those eyes carried truth. "I need to see Wu Hao," he said. "Tell him Liang is here." Wu Hao's breath hitched when Liang stepped into the room. His college roommate, his best friend, the only person who had known everything. "Maylin," Wu Hao rasped. "Did you ever find her?" Liang didn't answer right away. He pulled a folder from his coat. Inside, photographs, hospital records, a birth certificate. Wu Hao's hand trembled as he took it. The names stared up at him. Xuanjun, mother, Maylin, father, Wu Hao. Liang spoke softly. "She never wanted to bother you. She raised him alone. But when she was dying, she gave me these. She said, he should know who he is." Tears clung to Wu Hao's lashes. "Where is he now?" "He's alive, and brilliant, quiet, like her. I think he was made for something." Wu Hao whispered to himself, "The blood that speaks, even in silence." Xuanjun stood before the towering doors of Wu Hao Group's headquarters, dressed in plain slacks and a navy coat. He looked nothing like the sharks in the building, but his eyes, calm and resolute, echoed the man who built it all. The receptionist squinted. "Do you have an appointment?" "I was told to come. Wu Hao is expecting me." Minutes later, the chairman rose from his chair with effort as Xuanjun entered. They stared at each other, two strangers bound by invisible blood. Then Wu Hao stepped forward and did what he had never done with Yu Tao. He embraced him. Word spread fast. The boardroom boiled. The rumors were whispered, then shouted. The chairman brought in an outsider. He says it's his true son. DNA confirmed. But Yu Tao? Yu Tao laughed when he heard. Let me get this straight, he said to his assistant, chuckling. The old man dragged some bastard out of a village and thinks he'll replace me? This company is mine. I'm Pharaoh in this kingdom. He poured himself a drink, and Moses just walked into Egypt. Blessing carried the mop and bucket down the 63rd floor hallway like she always did. People barely saw her. That was her power. But she saw everything. She saw Xuanjun standing at the conference room window, hands clasped alone. Saw the board whisper behind his back. Saw Yu Tao storm out cursing like thunderclouds. Later that day, she called her cousin back in Lagos on her lunch break. No, girl, you don't understand. Chairman Wu Hao just dropped a truth bomb. Turns out the real heir's been hidden all this time like Moses in a basket. She laughed. But let me tell you the kicker, she said, lowering her voice. He sent this gentle-looking man, soft-spoken and serious, to take back the company from that demon, Yu Tao. She shook her head. That's like God sending Moses to tell Pharaoh to let his people go. She paused, then added, I just hope he knows Pharaoh don't let go easily. The private lounge at the top of Wu Hao Group's headquarters was shrouded in silence. Its floor-to-ceiling windows cast pale light over gold-trimmed armchairs and a tea set older than the building itself. But none of it matched the gravity that sat between them. Wu Hao, the Titan. Xuanjun, the secret son. They sat opposite one another, a carved oak table between them. On it, the steaming tea remained untouched. Xuanjun studied the man who, for decades, had only been a name whispered in business magazines. His father looked older than any picture, fragile, regal, but weary. Wu Hao was the first to speak. You have her eyes, he said quietly. Xuanjun didn't flinch. Everyone says that. Wu Hao looked down at his trembling hands. I didn't know. About you. Malin, she vanished. She didn't vanish, Xuanjun replied, voice calm but heavy. She was erased. That hit the air like a stone dropped in still water. Wu Hao closed his eyes. You're right. I erased her. I let my family speak louder than my heart, and I built this empire thinking it would protect me from the guilt. Silence. Then, did she suffer? Wu Hao asked, voice cracked and bare. Xuanjun blinked. She was never bitter. She told me to live gently, speak less, work hard. He leaned forward slightly, his voice low. She also told me I didn't need a father to define me. Wu Hao's breath hitched. Shame washed over him like a tide. Then why did you come? He asked. Xuanjun didn't hesitate. Because even if I don't need you, there's still something broken here, something that was stolen, and I don't want it for the money. I want to know why. I want to know what kind of man lets another be raised in his name while his real son grows up in silence. Wu Hao's eyes brimmed. Because I was afraid, he whispered. Because I was a coward. And because I owed your mother a kingdom I never gave her. He reached into his jacket, pulled out a gold ring, the family crest etched into its face, and slid it across the table. This is yours. I know it's only metal, but if you accept it, then I'll fight to give you back everything else they tried to keep from you. Xuanjun stared at it. The ring was heavy, but so was his name. The HR department was colder than he expected, not in temperature, but in spirit. Xuanjun stood near the digital board listing today's department headcounts. Red marks, terminated, flashed across entire columns. Departments gutted, teams wiped out. The cruelty was efficient. He had a folder tucked beneath his arm, notes on possible rehiring plans, restructuring. He turned, distracted by the rustling of a mop on linoleum. A woman in a gray janitor's jumpsuit was humming softly, gospel under her breath. She was dark-skinned, with coiled hair tied under a scarf, and a way of walking like she had more authority than her clothes suggested. He nodded politely. "Good morning." She glanced up, then gave him a slow once-over. "You're the son, ain't you?" He blinked. "Excuse me?" She leaned her weight on the mop handle, eyes sharp and full of humor. "Chairman Wu Hao's true heir, the one everyone's whispering about, the Moses to Pharaoh's heir." Xuanjun raised a brow. "You've been listening to rumors." "I listen for a living, honey. They pay me to clean, but I pick up what falls through the cracks. And right now, this place is cracking." She gestured at the red board. "All those people? Gone. Good people. Whole families. Some didn't even get a thank you. Just an email." Xuanjun felt a pulse of guilt. "I didn't know it was this bad." "Course you didn't. You're new and quiet. Like someone walking into a lion's den without realizing he's got raw meat in his pockets." He chuckled softly. "And which lion would that be?" "Yu Tao," she said without flinching. "He's not your brother. He's Pharaoh. And you?" She stepped closer, her voice lowering like a warning and a blessing. "You're the one God sent in with a stick and a word. Don't underestimate that." He stared at her. "What's your name?" She smiled, wiping a spot on the glass door. "Blessing." Xuanjun let the name sink in. He reached into his folder, pulled out a page with early rehiring options. "Would you look this over for me?" She paused. "You want my opinion?" "Yes. You see what I don't. That's what vision is, isn't it? Seeing what's beneath the surface." Blessing stared at him for a long second, then took the page. Her expression softened. Not quite approval, but something close. "Well," she said with a grin, "maybe Moses might have a shot after all." Most people saw Blessing Adeyemi as the janitor. They saw the mop, the gloves, the thick-soled shoes that squeaked down the marble floors of Wu Hao Group's towers. They saw her late-night shift badge and the faded name tag. But no one ever asked why a woman with her poise, her eyes, and her presence was pushing a mop in a billion-dollar empire. No one ever looked twice, except one man, and even he hadn't asked. Not yet. The city lights below blinked like stars with secrets. It was past midnight. Most of the offices were dark except for the 41st floor, where Blessing stood alone, watching the blinking cursor on the monitor of an empty desk. Payroll. This desk used to belong to her. 2 years ago, she'd sat right there. Cardigans, lipstick, coffee mug with the words, "I don't work miracles. I hire them." She had been one of the rising stars in HR smart, kind, unshakable. She knew how to read people, how to fight for them, until Yu Tao came. He'd reorganized the structure like a chess game, only he didn't like queens who could see through him. And Blessing had seen through him. "You've got talent," Yu Tao had told her, smiling like a man who already owned her future. "But you care too much about people. That's not a trait we value anymore." A week later, she was gone. Not fired, demoted, transferred to maintenance, pending reassignment. It was a message: stay quiet or disappear. She had stood in front of the mirror that night in her one-room apartment, the fluorescent light flickering, her reflection tired and furious. "Lord," she whispered, hands clenched, "you gave me a voice. You gave me sight, but you've left me here. Why?" Her mother's Bible lay open on the dresser. Exodus chapter 14, verse 14. "The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still." Stillness felt like death, but she stayed. Day after day, she watched as good people were discarded like trash. She mopped bloodless floors and wiped desks of men who made more in a week than she had made in a year. She watched promotions handed out like wine at weddings. None for women like her. None for people who asked why. And yet, she remained. Because something in her whispered, "There is a reason you're still in this palace, Esther, even if no one sees your crown." Blessing didn't come from wealth. She came from Abeokuta, Nigeria, raised by a single mother who scrubbed hospital floors and spoke to Jesus like he was a roommate. "Your name is Blessing," her mama used to say, "and it's not because life will bless you, it's because you will bless life, even when it spits you out." She had earned a scholarship, come to China for university, built a life from scraps. No one gave her anything. And now she lived invisibly. But God, he didn't forget invisible people. She could feel it. When she first saw Xuanjun standing at the boardroom window, she'd recognized it in his posture, that quiet pain, that calling he didn't fully understand yet. A gentle man, tossed into a lion's den, a lamb among wolves, a Moses, reluctant, unsure. "Don't send me," she murmured that night, mimicking the old words of Moses. "I stutter in boardrooms. I shake when I'm angry. I break when I'm tired." Then she looked at her reflection in the glass, her dark skin, her tired eyes, her name tag. "Lord, if you've sent me here for such a time as this," she pressed her hand to her chest, "then use me. Use every scar, every silence, every shift." She turned off the light and walked back toward the elevator, mop in hand, heart full of holy defiance. The next morning, Xuanjun found her by the service elevator, sipping coffee from a thermos and writing something on a scrap of receipt paper. "Morning," he said. Blessing looked up. "You sleep at all?" He shook his head. "Too many wolves in my dreams." She chuckled. "You'll get used to them. Learn their patterns. Learn how to walk through them without bleeding." He hesitated. "Can I ask you something?" "Shoot." "Why are you here? I mean, really here?" She didn't answer right away. Then, folding the receipt in half, she said, "Because some kingdoms fall from the inside, and someone has to be there to light the match." She handed him the folded paper. He opened it. Written in thick black ink were 3 names. Workers she knew had been unfairly fired. Dates, departments, contact info. "They're still in the city," she said. "Still looking for work. You want to rebuild the house Pharaoh corrupted? Start with the people he trampled." Xuanjun looked at her like he was seeing a lighthouse in the fog. "You're more than a blessing." She smiled, tilting her head. "I know." By all appearances, Wu Hao Group was still the crown jewel of Chinese enterprise. Polished floors, gleaming elevators, towering steel that reached for the sky. But inside, it was rotting. Xuanjun saw it immediately. Departments that once overflowed with creativity had become ghost towns. Bright minds were silenced. Innovation had been replaced with fear. And the only sound louder than silence was the clicking of heels. Rushing, cold, obedient. This is Egypt, he thought grimly. A beautiful prison. Gold walls with blood under them. In his first week as strategic advisor, he reviewed every file Blessing gave him. Former employees, internal memos, the human cost behind the spreadsheets. He began inviting back a few quietly. No fanfare, no press, just private contracts and late-night calls. It started with Mrs. Wei, a retired logistics manager with a spine like steel and a memory sharper than the firm's hard drives. She returned with tears in her eyes and reorganized a supply chain Yutao had butchered. Next came Dai Min, a shy junior analyst Yutao had fired for inefficiency. Turns out, she designed a forecasting model years ahead of its time. Xuanjun reinstated her, and profits from their pilot project increased by 11% in 2 weeks. But every success drew heat. Yutao noticed. Who authorized her return? Yutao's voice boomed through the hallway. Xuanjun remained seated at the long glass table in the executive boardroom. Calm, still. She was rehired under Clause 3C of the Charter's Discretion Clause, he said. Yutao leaned in, eyes like knives. That clause hasn't been used in 10 years. Xuanjun met his gaze. Maybe it's time we remembered how this place was built. The room went still. Then Yutao laughed. Let me explain something to you, half-brother. This company isn't a charity. It doesn't run on loyalty or sentiment. It runs on leverage. And I'm the leverage here. He leaned closer, whispering. You may have blood, but I have control. Xuanjun stood slowly. Control can be taken. Legacies can't. Yutao's smile vanished. Blessing had moved quietly into Xuanjun's daily rhythm. Not as a subordinate, but a mirror. She listened when others talked over him. She reminded him of the big picture when frustration threatened his patience. She prayed when he couldn't sleep. They often met in the break room at night, long after the office emptied. One night, she found him staring at a stack of legal papers. You look like Moses when Pharaoh laughed in his face. Xuanjun smiled tiredly. Do you ever stop with the biblical metaphors? Not when they fit this well, she said, smiling. He sighed. I feel like I'm pushing against stone walls with bare hands. Blessing poured him tea. You're not here to push, you're here to speak. He looked up. Speak? She nodded, settling beside him. Moses didn't break Pharaoh with swords. He broke him with words, warnings, plagues, and the power that backed him wasn't from Egypt's courts. It was from God. And you think God cares about corporate structure? Blessing leaned forward. I believe God always cares when oppression dresses in a suit. Silence. Then her voice softened. The moment you were born, someone tried to erase your name from the book, but now you're here, and Pharaoh's heart is hardening. She looked at him. You better be ready, because plagues are coming. It started with Project Andromeda, Yutao's prized digital expansion in South Asia, a deal worth millions. 1 week after its launch, it collapsed. A whistleblower released documents showing unethical labor practices under Yutao's approval. Headlines erupted. Then the Shanghai Investor Summit. Half the board pulled out overnight after a leaked video showed Yutao mocking disabled workers during a private dinner. No one knew who leaked it. Then came the security breach, a massive cyber flaw in the infrastructure Yutao approved personally. Client data compromised, lawsuits incoming. The board grew uneasy. Whispers became worried. Xuanjun didn't gloat. He rebuilt quietly, hired internally, cut back executive bonuses, hosted brown bag sessions with lower-level staff. The halls slowly filled with laughter again. People began looking him in the eye. Pharaoh was shaking. Wu Hao lay in his bed, the city skyline blinking like a silent audience behind him. His breath was shallow, his voice nearly gone. Set up the camera, he rasped. His assistant hesitated. Now. A simple camcorder, a single light. Wu Hao stared straight into the lens. If you are watching this, I am no longer alive. My name is Wu Hao, and I have one truth left to give. He coughed, hand trembling. I built an empire on ambition, but I gave my throne to the wrong son. I did not know then that Yutao was not mine by blood, but I did know, eventually, and I said nothing, out of guilt, out of shame. He paused, but silence is no shield, and I cannot die a coward." His eyes moistened. "Xuanjun is my son, my blood, my heir." He leaned forward. "If you believe in legacy, justice, or mercy, then follow him. If you serve this company with heart, not fear, then rise with him." He took a long, shaky breath. "I failed you, son, but maybe this is how I fix it." The screen went black. The next morning, the video never aired. The file, gone. The assistant, reassigned. Security footage, wiped. Xuanjun stood in the chairman's suite, looking at the empty desk where the camcorder once sat. "He left me truth," he whispered. Behind him, Yutao's voice cut through like cold water. "And I left you silence." Xuanjun turned. "You erased his last words?" Yutao's smile was ice. "Words are nothing without proof. And you're not Moses, little brother. You're just noise in a palace built for kings." Xuanjun didn't reply, but deep in his soul, something was changing. The lamb was learning to roar. The city was quiet that night, too quiet. Rain tapped softly against the wide windows of the executive lounge where Xuanjun sat, hunched over a stack of reports. He looked like a man aging too fast. Shoulders tight, eyes red, tie loosened and forgotten beside his laptop. Behind him, the door clicked open. He didn't turn. Only one person entered his space like that now. "Blessing," he said without looking. She appeared at his side, silent at first. Then she set down a steaming mug. Ginger tea, honey, cinnamon, the same blend he liked. He'd never told her. "You didn't come to the cafeteria," she said softly. He stared ahead. Didn't want to be seen. Didn't want to talk. She didn't push. She sat down across from him instead. "Want to tell me what happened?" He exhaled. "The video. My father's confession. It's gone." Blessing stilled. "Yutao?" He nodded. "Erased everything. Like my mother never existed. Like I never existed. And he said I'm just noise in a palace made for kings." Blessing leaned forward, voice steady. "He's right." Xuanjun's gaze snapped up. She smiled, not mocking, but fierce. "You are noise, divine noise, the kind that breaks silence, the kind that makes the earth tremble." He looked at her as if seeing her for the first time again. "How do you always know what to say?" She shrugged. "Because I've been buried too, and I know the sound a soul makes when it claws its way out." He swallowed, throat tight. "How did you do it? How did you survive all this? Alone?" Blessing looked away, then back at him. Her eyes were darker in the rainlight. "I stopped looking for someone to rescue me, and I became the answer to my own prayers." She stood slowly, walked toward the window. The city glowed in a blur of color behind her. "But sometimes," she added softly, "you meet someone who makes you believe, maybe I don't have to carry this armor all the time." Xuanjun rose and followed her. They stood side by side, nothing theatrical, just the kind of silence that held weight. "Can I tell you something?" he asked, voice lower now. "Of course." "You're the only person who makes me feel like I can breathe in this place." Blessing's lips parted, then closed. He looked at her, truly looked. The curve of her jaw, the way her eyes never flinched, even when the whole world did. "I've lived a long time thinking I didn't deserve softness," he murmured. "And now?" she asked. "Now I think maybe softness is strength." She reached up and gently touched his collar, straightened it. "Your mother taught you well." "And you?" She smiled. "I learned from the wilderness. But I've been waiting a long time for something to bloom." Xuanjun's hand found hers, hesitant, unsure. But she didn't pull away. their fingers intertwined, not like a movie, not like a fantasy, but like two souls that had both been dropped into the middle of a war and found peace in each other. "Can I stay here?" he asked, not just about the room. "You're not here by accident," she whispered. "You're here by God's design." And in that moment, surrounded by rain, ruin, and rising hope, they stood like pillars carved from loss and lit by promise. They didn't kiss. They didn't need to. What they shared in that moment was older than romance. It was recognition. The revolution didn't start in a boardroom. It started in a forgotten stairwell behind the HR wing, where the fluorescent light flickered like it was afraid of the truth. Blessing stood beside the chipped wall, her scarf tucked tightly around her hair, eyes sharp. "Third floor. Supply team. One of Yutao's cousins fired them last year over budget cuts, but they knew how to track invoices that didn't add up. Xuanjun wrote their names down. You trust them?" "I trust hungry people who haven't forgotten what it means to build with bare hands." He nodded. "Let's start there." By day, Xuanjun still wore the mask. He sat in strategy meetings. He offered polite objections. He nodded when dismissed. Yutao strutted through the halls like a crowned pharaoh, issuing orders that bled departments dry. But by night, he and Blessing moved like shadows. They visited small apartments in forgotten neighborhoods. They sat on floors with workers who still wore their old ID badges in shoeboxes, unable to throw them away. And one by one, they listened, not just to complaints, but to ideas, dreams, systems that once worked and could again. "We used to run logistics like a bloodstream," said Mrs. Luo, her hands stained with the factory ink. "Then they cut our hours and turned the floor into a grave. We had mentorship programs for interns," added Mr. Ren from facilities. "Yutao said it was sentimental fluff. Now we've got turnover like a revolving door." "No one feels safe," murmured a woman from reception. "Not safe, not seen." Xuanjun looked at each of them. "I can't promise safety," he said, "but I can promise we'll build something where people matter again." And with Blessing at his side, and God as their guide, he began rebuilding the soul of the empire, one voice at a time. In a storage room deep beneath the archives, Blessing rolled out a massive paper blueprint, an old layout of the company's departments. They marked it up in red ink. "Here's where Yutao slashed," she said, tapping 5 departments. "And here, finance, still untouched. That's where the money laundering is happening. I'd bet my last breath." Xuanjun raised a brow. "You sure?" "I've been here 10 years, she replied. "Even when they silenced me, I paid attention. People talk when they think you're invisible." He looked at her. This woman who had been erased, yet somehow saw everything. "You're the most powerful voice in this building," he said softly. Blessing didn't flinch. "I'm just tired of being the echo. I want to be the bell." They kept working. Notes, timelines, patterns, internal memos. Blessing had quietly copied years ago. They were building a case, legally sound, emotionally devastating. But more than that, they were building a movement. It started happening slowly, a ripple effect. The cleaning staff began leaving anonymous notes in the supply closet, tips, warnings, overheard conversations. The cafeteria manager returned Blessing's nod with quiet approval. A young programmer sent Xuanjun encrypted files showing suspicious account transfers. "I don't want a bonus," he'd said. "I just want to believe in something again." And for the first time in years, the building began to breathe again. Not in fear, in hope. Xuanjun walked the halls differently now. Not with arrogance, but with quiet purpose. And when people passed him, they didn't just look away anymore. They met his eyes. That night, In a small side office lit only by a desk lamp, Blessing sat with her back against the wall. Xuanjun was beside her, hands covered in ink from days of note-taking. They hadn't spoken in minutes, just the comfort of presence. "You really think we'll win?" he asked quietly. She looked at him. "I don't believe in winning. I believe in liberation." He turned to her. "What if we lose everything?" Blessing reached over, took his hand. "Then we still didn't lose ourselves." A pause. "You're not fighting Yu Tao," she whispered. "You're unburying a kingdom." And then she added, even softer, "And I think God sent me here for you." Xuanjun stared at her, something tender rising in his throat. "I think you were sent here to lead me out of Egypt." They sat in the candle glow, the walls around them old and cracked, but it felt like a temple. And in the stillness where fear and love twisted like incense, Xuanjun whispered what neither of them had dared speak aloud before. "You're not just my compass, Blessing. You're my beginning." She didn't answer, but she leaned her forehead to his, and that was enough. The city was hushed, cloaked in velvet dark, and the hush of wind brushing steel towers. Above the clouds, stars pressed like witnesses, and far below, on the rooftop of Wuhao Group, Blessing stood alone. The air was crisp, the kind of cold that felt like prophecy. She had her coat pulled tight and her arms folded across her chest. Her scarf had loosened, curls catching the wind like small, quiet flames. It was nearly midnight. In less than 12 hours, everything would change. Inside the building, Xuanjun was finalizing the last files. Whistleblower testimonies, leaked documents, names, numbers, truth. By morning, he would walk into the boardroom, stand before the empire built to exclude him, and call Pharaoh by name. But here, beneath the stars, it was her turn to speak, not to men, but to God. She knelt slowly on the gravel rooftop, brushing away a few stray pebbles. Her knees found the ground like they remembered it. She closed her eyes, exhaled, and then she began, not loud, not rehearsed, just raw. "Almighty Father in heaven." Her voice trembled, but not from fear. "You see us. You've always seen us, even when no one else did." She looked up. "You saw Malin when they erased her name. You saw Xuanjun when they called him a mistake. You saw me, Lord, sweeping floors in silence, waiting for something I didn't have the words for." Her breath caught, but she kept going. "I don't know why you chose me, why you brought me to this building, why you gave me eyes to see beneath its floors, or why you let me feel so much when it hurt so deep. But if you're still listening," she wiped at her cheek, "then tomorrow, go in him, go with him, go before him, stand behind him, speak through him." She placed a hand on her chest. "And if you must break something, break the lies, break the chains, but don't break his spirit. In Jesus' name." Silence. She drew in a shaky breath, then smiled through tears. "He doesn't know it yet, Lord, but he's already won. Not because Pharaoh falls, but because you are with us, and he never ran." Another pause. Wind stirred her scarf gently. "Lord Jesus, if you have just one more blessing left to give me, let Xuanjun walk out tomorrow still mine." She rose slowly, knees aching from cold, but heart lighter. Behind her, the door creaked open. Footsteps. Slow. Familiar. "Blessing?" Xuanjun's voice was soft. She didn't turn right away, only said, "I was just finishing something." He joined her, stepping beside her under the stars. He looked up. She looked at him. "Do you believe in miracles?" he asked. She smiled. "I am one." He reached for her hand. They didn't speak again. Not yet. Because sometimes silence was the holiest thing of all. The morning of the board meeting dawned silver and sharp. Xuanjun stood alone in his father's office, dressed not in designer threads, but in a charcoal gray suit his mother had sewn the lining into herself. On his chest was the family ring, not worn for power, but for proof. He gazed out the window as the city stirred beneath him, the empire of steel and silence. "This is the day," he whispered. Behind him, the door opened. Blessing entered, holding a manila folder and a quiet fire in her eyes. "He's already there," she said. Xuanjun turned to face her. "The others?" "Every dismissed leader we contacted is watching the live stream. Security's been alerted. Media will get the statement the second the board makes a decision." She paused. "We've covered every base, but if you're looking for a guarantee—" "I'm not," he said gently. "I'm looking for courage." She smiled. "Then you're dressed perfectly." He held her gaze, then stepped toward her. "You'll be with me? Until the end," she said. "And after that, too." The boardroom was ice. 12 executives. A glass table long enough to seat emperors. On one end, Yu Tao, flawless in a navy suit, fingers steepled like a king awaiting applause. On the other, Xuanjun, standing with no title, no crown, only documents, truth, the blessing of the unheard, and the presence of the only true God. Yu Tao leaned back. "Let me guess. You're here to weep about integrity." Xuanjun's voice was calm. "I'm here to reveal the cost of your crown." He opened the folder. Blessing stepped forward and placed copies at every seat. "What is this?" one board member asked. "Financial records," she answered, "signed under a proxy firm, coded through overseas holdings, all traced back to this room." The CFO flipped the pages. "Is this real?" Xuanjun nodded. "He's been embezzling from the company for over 5 years. Ghost departments, shell clients, bonuses wired to fake consultants." Yu Tao stood, red creeping up his neck. "This is lies. Fabricated nonsense." "Then explain the bank records," Blessing said. Her voice cut like prophecy. "Explain the luxury accounts opened in the name of fired workers. Explain the offshore firm owned by your ex-wife's cousin." Ooh, the room buzzed. Yu Tao turned to the chairman's seat. Empty. Father would never let this happen," he hissed. "He made me the heir." Xuanjun's voice cracked, but never wavered. "He left a message. You deleted it, but you didn't delete me, and you didn't delete what he left behind." He pulled out a smaller envelope, opened it. A handwritten letter from Wu Hao, dated, notarized, and sealed. "To my son, Xuanjun," he read aloud. "In my silence, I gave power to the wrong hands, but in my final days, I reclaimed what I lost." He looked at the board. "And now I ask you to do the same." Silence held the room hostage. Then Blessing stepped forward. She didn't shout. She didn't flinch. This company used to be a place where workers knew their worth, where legacy meant more than money. Now it's Egypt. Eyes turned. "You've been Pharaoh's men long enough. You've watched people suffer while you signed bonuses. You've let fear dictate policy, but fear doesn't build kingdoms." She paused. "Truth does. Vision does. And this man," she gestured to Xuanjun, "has carried the weight of a name he wasn't even allowed to speak." Her voice broke slightly, but she pressed on. "You've got one chance. Let this empire breathe again. Let our people go." The board vote wasn't unanimous, but it was decisive, 8-4. Yu Tao was removed from executive authority. All financial accounts frozen. An external audit launched. His access badge deactivated before he could speak. He stood trembling, humiliated. This company is nothing without me. Xuanjun's voice was soft. It was never yours to own. Security escorted Yutao out. The door closed behind him with the sound of an ending. Wu Hao passed that night. Peacefully. Quietly. In his sleep. But not before he whispered one last thing to the nurse. Tell him. He restored my name. Weeks later, the atmosphere in Wu Hao Group had changed. Laughter returned to break rooms. Departments were reopened. Health benefits reinstated. Meetings held in circles, not on thrones. And on one particular morning, Xuanjun walked the entire floor. No guards, no press. Just a man among those he now served. He paused to thank the cafeteria team, spoke with janitors, helped a new intern who dropped their tablet. You don't have to do this, someone said. A young assistant. Curious. Xuanjun smiled. I'm not doing it because I have to. A pause. I'm doing it because I remember what it feels like not to be seen. He turned a corner. Blessing was waiting. Scarf around her neck. A clipboard in one hand. A smile in the other. They walked side by side. Not as royalty, but as deliverers. Behind them, an old manager whispered, tears in his eyes. He came to lead. Another voice added, but he also came to set us free. 1 year later, spring had come to the city like a quiet vow. Slow, steady, and sure. The glass windows of Wu Hao Group no longer shimmered with icy pride. They bloomed, literally. Vines crawled over the garden terrace built on the 50th floor, where sun spilled warmth over laughter and lunch breaks. Inside the building, the floors buzzed, not with fear, but with life. Mothers dropped off toddlers at the new childcare wing. Retired workers came in as part-time mentors. Junior staff spoke openly in meetings, and when they laughed, they didn't look over their shoulders anymore. There were no more thrones here, just tables, round ones. Xuanjun stood in his new office, not at the top of the tower, but 2 floors above the common floor. A glass wall looked out over the garden he designed with Blessing's help. His desk was cluttered with blueprints and sticky notes from the innovation team. Someone had drawn a cartoon of him on the corner of a memo. Big glasses, crooked tie, soft smile. The caption read, "Our Moses." He shook his head with a laugh. "You're staring again," said a voice from the doorway. He turned. Blessing stood there in a soft cream blouse, curls tied up, clipboard in one hand, the other resting lightly on the curve of her belly. The sunlight caught the gold band on her finger. Simple, luminous. Like the vows they'd whispered to each other in the garden 9 months ago, under the cherry tree that still hadn't stopped blooming. She was 7 months pregnant now. Glowing didn't even begin to cover it. "I'm trying to figure out how we pulled this off," he murmured, crossing the room. "We didn't," she said with a knowing smile. "God did." He touched her stomach reverently. "And he's not done." They walked down together, hand in hand, down the halls lined with art made by employees' children, past the walls now decorated with the stories of every worker, etched plaques bearing names and contributions, from janitors to former CEOs, and into the garden, the one Blessing had insisted on building. "People need a place to rest," she told the board, "not just survive." At the center of the garden stood a single cherry tree, small, still growing. A plaque rested beneath it, for those who were unseen, for those who rose anyway. Blessing sat on the bench under it, easing down with a groan. "She kicked again," she said. "She?" Xuanjun blinked. "You're sure?" She smiled. "She's going to have your patience. And my voice." He sat beside her, arm around her shoulder. "Poor world," he said playfully. She laughed, but then she grew quiet. "Do you ever think about them?" she asked. "Your mother. Wu Hao. He nodded. Every day. Sometimes I wonder if they'd recognize me now. They would, she said, because you're still the same. Still the one who speaks softly but carries thunder. They sat in silence, listening to the wind. Then, as if on cue, a little girl toddled past the garden path. A worker's daughter, no older than 3. She looked up at Xuanjun, waved and said, "Hi, you're the nice man, the one who made the flowers come." He smiled. "I just helped someone plant them." The child waved again and ran off toward her mother. Blessing looked at him. "You realize that's the miracle, right?" "What is?" She rested her head on his shoulder. "That they see you not as a man who conquered an empire, but as someone who made things grow." Above them, the cherry blossoms stirred. Beneath them, the garden bloomed. And beside them, inside her, another story waited to be born. A story not of thrones or wars, but of faith, of healing, of a legacy finally rewritten. Empires built on silence eventually collapse, but the ones rebuilt on truth, they bloom. For every soul who was unseen, unheard, and unchosen, you were never forgotten. This was never just about blood. It was about calling and the courage to answer it. He didn't come to take the throne. He came to set them free. The end.